Hi, all. This is Hillary from Group 2, and today we're talking about power distance and leaders within organizational culture. So I wanted to give us a start with going over the assumption, values, and symbols, and how these pertain to organizational culture and how the leader can kind of shape a culture through these points. So first, I wanted to start by saying notable leaders, which is a quote from the book from page 236, notable leaders pay close attention to the elements of organizational culture rather than just reports and other things within the organization. So I thought that that was really a good place to start. And I kind of wanted to go through the assumptions. So these assumptions would be considered unstated beliefs. So this would be just things that maybe within the culture of the company, what the people believe in or what they don't necessarily talk about, but what they do. And then of course, next would be values. So this would be typically acknowledged by the members as what they ought to do. So this would be, oftentimes from maybe a vision statement, or if there, other sort of pieces that are put out by the leaders of the company, what the other members of the organization believe in. And then of course, symbols, what artifacts, which is anything from language, stories, buildings, anything like that. So I know that Allie, you work at Starbucks, right? So I'm sure that there's quite a few different artifacts there. Language, of course, is always changing too. So for me, of course, there's different acronyms within the company that I work for. There's different values that are constantly always changing. And do you guys have any examples of any sort of artifacts that are maybe different in your companies?
For Starbucks, we definitely have a lot of acronyms for how we would recover situations with customers. So for me, I instantly think of, we have an acronym called Latte, and it's a specific tool that they gave for us to basically how we would handle a disgruntled customer, whether their beverage is wrong or they had a bad experience in another store. We would use this acronym to kind of handle bad customer experiences.
Interesting. Now I'll know if I hear latte.
So the next part kind of goes into how a leader can shape these, and really the main thing is to lead by example. So, a leader that's telling you to do one thing, but then is always doing something else, obviously you're not carrying the culture of the company. So I know that I personally just kind of went through this past week. I was at a week-long managers conference in Washington, D.C., and we have a new senior VP, and she, we had all these team building and all these great speakers, and then as soon as she kind of broke off, and I had to work with her a couple of times, she just talked down to people, and she was just kind of like, we called her like quite a bit, like she was sucking the fun out of everything, which was, the opposite of what all the speakers were that she had hired to bring into the meeting to teach everybody. So I just kind of thought that was certainly, something interesting, and reminded me a lot of it as I was reading through this. Do you guys have any examples of maybe a time that a leader didn't lead by example?
Yes, definitely. When I was working for the county over here where I live, there was a person in my office. She held a higher position than I did. So she would expect everybody else to do certain things, which she had to do also, but she never did them. So basically, she was not doing exactly what she was preaching. So this, in a way, kind of, it wasn't very motivational for everybody else. So it caused a lot of internal conflict.
I think also that we can all be guilty of it ourselves. I mean, just with parenting, if I tell my kids to make their bed, have I made my bed yet? Things like that. It's something everyone's guilty of. So it's a good reminder to keep it in yourself as well.
So that's a pretty good example.
Yeah, that is a good Stacey. So those were kind of my basics of how, a leader leads by example, and how it ties into the elements of organizational culture. And I know, Allie, you've got some other points on leaders within the organizational culture.
Yes, so I was going to talk a little bit about positive culture in the workforce, and specifically a couple of things about that. So I've worked for Starbucks for over 5 years now, and I think they are an amazing example of positive culture. Our textbook even has a little blurb on page 240. It calls out Starbucks Howard. So I was going to talk a little bit about that. I think to have strong workplace culture, it totally starts with your leader, like Hillary was saying. On page 242, there's a gentleman named Edgar Schein who has 6 primary characteristics of positive culture in the workplace. And I think Starbucks hits all 6 of those. So I'm just going to kind of go really quickly over those. Number 1, attention. So Howard is our CEO of Starbucks. He gives all of our partners, all of our coworkers attention. He pays a lot of attention to detail, and he makes changes based on what we want or what we need. He also makes changes based on what customers are asking for. So I think he definitely pays attention to all of those little details, which is really important. Number 2, reaction to critical incidents. The book actually called this out. Starbucks was kind of tanking, not doing very well. Customers weren't coming in as much. Howard had stepped down as CEO and things just kind of hit the fan. So he actually came back as CEO in 2008 to rekindle and retake over the company to get that culture back in action. And he actually shut down every single Starbucks store that we have for training. So every single partner was retrained. So those reactions to those critical moments like that really can make or break your company. And it also is what that positive culture. And then number 4, role modeling. Great role model, like Hillary was talking about earlier, leading by example. That's really, really important. Number 5, rewards. So to have positive culture, you have to reward your employees, whether it's their benefits or for Starbucks to pay for my college at ASU, bonuses for training new hires. All those sorts of things really do help positive culture as well. And then last but not least, selection. You do have to select the right people to fit into your culture. So Starbucks is not the job for everybody, and a lot of people don't really understand our culture, and that's fine. It's not, for everyone. You have to pick the right people to fit into the right job, and I think that is really key as well. So those are just those 6 characteristics of what positive work culture could be, and I feel like Starbucks, where I work, hits all of those, and that's why we have such a great work culture. Do any of you guys have experiences?
So where I work, I believe I don't work nearly as in a positive environment as Starbucks. I love going in there. You instantly feel the ambiance of relaxation and everything like that. So my culture is a little different where I work, and you're right in that you have to have the right person. We have to have people who can deal with a lot of stress, sometimes getting talked to poorly, and I'll get to talk about mine in a little bit, but also dealing with the cultures, the different professors and how they speak to you. Sometimes it can be offensive, but it's their culture. So you do have to have the right people to understand that and deal with it the right way.
I agree. I think that not every single job can be done by everybody. You have to have a certain thing. For example, Starbucks, I'm guessing you need a lot of patience because you're dealing with a lot of customers, and most of the time, they're not the happy, smiley, friendly people. So, you have to be patient.
They haven't had their coffee yet.
Exactly. And I know for my job, I work with high school students, and I know it's sometimes a bit difficult, and I know a lot of people would not have the patience to be dealing with teenagers on a daily basis because it can get a little bit hectic. So I think that in my position, I think you have to be dedicated and passionate about what you do. Otherwise, I know there was a person who was hired prior to me getting the job, and this person only lasted a couple of months because she couldn't do it. It was just too much for her.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about putting the right people in the right positions, and they might have the skill set on paper, but there's been a couple of times where we've put somebody in a position and a few months down the road realize maybe they'd be better in a different department or in a different position, and they excel there. So it's just finding the right place for the right person.
Good point.
Definitely. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about. There was a study done on cultural patterns, and this is talked about in chapter 10. I'm going to be talking about power distance, and you can find this on page 305 of the textbook. Anyway, as I was reading, it said that a man from the Netherlands named Gert Hofstede, he conducted a study and he wanted to determine the important values that are programmed into members of various cultures. Anyway, when it comes to power distance, he actually said that all societies are unequal. And he also said that some are more unequal than others, which, if you really think about it, it's kind of true sometimes. Anyway, in high power distance cultures, inequality is considered to be normal. They see it as something that is okay, but in a way, they are obligated to be taking care of those who are less fortunate. And they don't always do this. Those who are considered ranking as high status individuals, they always try to look as powerful as they possibly can, but they don't do this through gaining respect from the people. They actually do it through coercive means, and they also use their title or their position and power to do this. And the book gave a few examples of various countries who fall into this position. For example, citizens in the Philippines, Mexico, Venezuela, India, Singapore, they are ranked among the highest in power distance, while residents of New Zealand, Denmark, Israel, Austria, and Sweden are the lowest. And I'm surprised that the United States didn't fall in the lowest power distance categories. And when I was reading through this, Mexico did actually come into mind because right now, the whole economical situation that the country is facing, the corruption, and everything that's going on, a lot of the high ranking officials basically they are abusing the power they have, and the poor are getting poorer, and the rich people are getting even more rich. So, when it comes to low power distance cultures, basically they are uncomfortable with differences in wealth, status, power, privilege, so they are promoting equal rights. I'm surprised that the book didn't mention the U.S. in this, example again. And basically, the members of these groups, what they try to do, they emphasize interdependence, and they rely on reward, legitimate, and expert power. So superiors are similar to their subordinates, and they may try to appear less powerful than they actually are because they want to promote a sense of equality. And when it comes to organizations, I have a feeling that sometimes this can happen a lot where, leaders or managers, they tend to focus a lot on what they can do. And they rarely let, the subordinates take a little bit of that weight off, allowing them to, actually work without a lot of supervision. So these people feel that just because they have, a certain uh, title, they feel like they can do whatever they want. So they're not basically respecting the people that they are supposed to be looking after. Have any of you, experienced anything with a manager or a leader where you feel like you were looked down upon?
I've definitely
Yeah.
had.
Sorry, you go.
Stacy.
Yeah, I have. It was in an industry I didn't like. It was sales. So it was kind of a dog eat dog kind of industry. And in order to be somebody, you had to do good in sales. And I don't know, it just wasn't a very empowering and positive environment. And I think a lot of people looked down on a lot of people. So I got out.
Yeah, I think that, with it being such a capitalistic nation, I think that probably would be what keeps us off that low list, just that there are those like the industry that you were in, Stacy. There's just still that divide that, the rich want to get richer and at all possible costs.
That's exactly right. I agree with that. So, Jose, are you done with your thoughts?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and go into mine. I'm going to talk about masculinity and femininity. This, too, is one of Gert Hofstede's study where he did a cultural patterns, as Jose just talked about his. This one in masculinity and femininity struck a chord with me because, as I previously mentioned on Allie's point, I work with a lot of professors who are from all over the world. And there's not really a male or female dominance. I work at ASU. And so the culture at ASU, the diversity at ASU is incredible. So again, there's not really a dominance for male or female. But what struck me about this is because I am female, oftentimes the depending on where some of the men are from, I get spoken to differently. I've been told to stop speaking. I don't speak until they're done speaking to me. And some of them shut the door. Some of them get very close. You can tell that they just have different behavioral cultures that, it's really close to crossing a line. But again, this also goes back to having the right person in the role that we perform in. So one of the topics was that I found interesting was in Norway, Sweden, and the Netherlands, and Denmark, that's where feminine is ranked the highest for being leaders. And Japan, Austria, Venezuela, and Italy were the most masculine-led roles. I could agree with that because that is in line with a lot of where the professors are that I work with. I actually work with a professor who's a female, and she's from Norway, and that is that's exactly in line with that. So it does say that females in masculine cultures have a harder time emerging as leaders and are more likely segregated into fewer specialized occupations. That's really unfortunate. I don't know if you guys heard in the news yesterday, but we potentially will have our very first U.S. Navy SEAL. She's going through trainings and conditionings and stuff like that, but it was just in January 2016, it was just allowed for females to start trying out to be a Navy SEAL, and this is one of the first applicants. So I'm happy that America is opening their doors to widening options and opportunities for females. And Sheryl Sandberg, if you guys have not gotten to watch the TED video for our second discussion host this week, she is very empowering for female leaders. So with all that said, do you guys have any experience having a male or female dominant leader issues, good things?
Well, I mean, I haven't had any issues myself, but a couple of years ago, the job that I was at, one of the guys that was there, he felt like he was entitled to a lot simply because he was a man. And the way that he spoke to our female coworkers wasn't exactly very respectful, you could say. So he had this very macho personality about him. I didn't like that. I don't know if it had to do with the fact that he wasn't raised here in the United States, but, when I started working there, I saw this going on and I kind of put a stop to it. So whenever I was there, he wouldn't treat them that way because he knew I would always say something about it. But when I got there, you know, a lot of the female coworkers, they did tell me, yeah, he treats us this way or he talks to us in a certain way because he feels that he is entitled to more power, and simply because he's a man, which I totally disagreed with because, you know, I have a sister. I wouldn't like any man to be treating her that way.
Good for you for educating him. He probably took you more serious than he would have taken the females because you were male.
Definitely.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but sometimes, because even though they're from a different place in the world, it doesn't mean it's okay. But oftentimes it's simply just due to a lack of education and they just don't know any better.
Yes, I agree with that.
Does anybody else have anything else to add? I don't want to go over our time too much.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like we filled up another time slot.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to end it.